Hi everybody, and blessed be, it's me Alex. Today I'm doing the answers to the questions video that I started about a week ago, and I received all kinds of really great questions. I've got them all in a basket here, and I'm going to pick them one by one, and I'm going to try to answer them and give my own opinions and perspectives on things. Of course, I don't set myself up as an authority on anything, and I can only share my own perspectives and opinions about different things. So I'm going to try to answer these questions. There were some really, really great questions. And so I'm going to just get started. Boo's here with me too somewhere. She'll be in and out, I'm sure. This one is, who is your favorite here in YouTube, and do you have more than one? I actually have so many channels that I really, really love and that I really, really admire. I would encourage you to check out on my channel. I have listed 16 channels that I watch all the time, and those are really some of my favorites. And if you're not on that list, that doesn't mean that you're not one of my favorites. It just means that it only lets us list 16, and I have so many that I really watch and really love. This one is, I'm right now trying to focus on finding the origins of Wiccanism and paganism, and was wondering what books you would recommend. I would recommend, the first book I would recommend would be Drawing Down the Moon by Margaret Adler. And it's a slightly older book, but it really does get into the origins of modern Wicca and paganism and some of the neo-pagan groups and things. And I really like her perspective, Margaret Adler. So I would encourage you to read that book. There's another one that I'm intending to read called Triumph of the Moon by Hutton. And I've seen mixed reviews about it, but it's one also that I intend to check out. So I would look for that one as well. This one is, do you have to practice magic to be a pagan or a Wiccan? And no, absolutely not. In traditional Wicca, all Wiccans were trained magically, and it was a big part of training in Wicca. But there are Wiccans and pagans who never practice magic and who just focus on the religious and spiritual side of things. And yeah, so that's my perspective on it. One doesn't have to practice magic in order to be a Wiccan or to be a pagan. Do you have a totem animal, and what is your favorite wildlife animal? I do. My initial totem, I have several that I work with. My initial totem animal is the wolf. And even though I work with the goddess Bast, which is the cat goddess, the wolf is my primary totem. And of course the cat is one of my totems as well. I also work with the bat totem sometimes. My favorite wildlife animal, I really love all animals, but my favorite, if I had to choose a favorite, would be the cats, really, the tigers and panthers and those kinds of things. I really am drawn to that particular kind of wildlife. This one is, I thought it would be a good idea to perhaps tell people about the differences of pagans, Wiccans, Reconstructionists, and witches. A lot of people entering one of these paths tend to become confused on the differences of them. And that's such a good question. Of course, if you look up the word pagan in the dictionary, most dictionaries are going to say something like a pagan is someone who is outside of the three monotheistic faiths of Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. And of course, that's not exactly how I define paganism. I think pagan refers to a religion that is earth-centered and that is nature-based, and usually polytheistic, animistic, and shamanistic. Reconstructionists are pagans who are trying to reconstruct ancient pagan religions. Like, for example, there is the Kemetic Orthodox Temple in Chicago. I think it's still there. And there are people who are trying to reconstruct ancient Greek paganism. And, of course, there's Celtic Reconstructionists who are trying to reconstruct authentic Celtic spirituality and religion. Of course, Wicca is a religion in its own right. And I wouldn't technically call Wicca Reconstructionist, even though a great deal of what constitutes Wicca today is a reconstruction a highly eclectic reconstruction that was put together by Gerald Gardner and the early Wiccans when they were formulating what we now know as Wicca. And witches, I think I talked a little bit about this in one of my previous videos, but witches and Wiccans, the early Wiccans thought of Wicca as the same thing as witchcraft, and often used witchcraft and Wicca as synonymous. And in fact, they usually referred to their religion as the religion of witchcraft, which they thought of as the old religion. Wicca, though, is a very eclectic and in some ways reconstructionist religion. I think part of it is the early Wiccans were extremely eclectic. They drew from Germanic cultures and from Celtic cultures and from various sources when they were putting together our idea of the Wheel of the Year and the practices that we engage in. A lot of things came from Masonic sources even, and other sources like that. So it's a highly eclectic and reconstructionist kind of tradition in itself. There are witches who practice magic and who practice other forms of witchcraft that aren't Wicca, and so there is a difference there. Some witches, of course, don't claim to be Wiccan. Pagan, I tend to think of pagan as an umbrella term which covers all of the reconstructionist traditions and all of the witchcraft traditions and all of the different traditions of Wicca. All of those I classify as pagan because they're part of a larger movement of earth-based nature religions that tend to be polytheistic and animistic and shamanistic, like I said before. So sometimes people who are just starting out, they might encounter people who use those terms differently. And people have different associations with those words, and they often use them differently. But those are the associations that I typically use. My question is in regards to the gods and goddesses. How many can you have in your personal pantheon? Are there any benefit to having more than one? Personally, I think you can have as many as appeal to you, as call out to you. I don't work with deities that I don't have a relationship with. And if I feel drawn to work with a specific deity, then here's what I do. I do some research about that deity so I know something about them from their mythology and from their historical context and historical worship. And before I ever engage in any kind of work with a specific deity, I spend some time in meditation and in prayer to that deity, and I introduce myself to them, and I don't just automatically jump in and invoke or evoke a deity that I've never worked with before, because I think that's rude, and I think it can be counterproductive to do it that way. So I think it's a matter of personal choice and personal guidance, what you feel guided to work with. So you can have as many gods and goddesses in your personal pantheon as you feel led to have. And like I said, some people work with a traditional pantheon from a specific culture or time. And are there any benefit to having more than one? Yeah, I think there is. I think that some deity forms have a certain domain that they are over or that they work with, and sometimes that can be very beneficial to work with a deity that, for example, like if you're doing something about travel or communication, it might be helpful to work with a deity that is has rulership over that domain, or that is embodied in that domain. So yeah, I think that it can be very beneficial to having more than one. This question is, what are your feelings, opinions on the Ouija board, and how old were you when you found Wicca, and when did you tell people? It's interesting because me and Kit have a collection of a small collection of antique Ouija boards, which I think are very cool. I think that, like any kind of tool, I think as long as we approach it with respect and with knowledge, I think that it's fine. Wiccans don't normally work with summoning the dead or with commanding them, but we do, especially around Samhain, and at certain times of the year, we do invite the souls and spirits of our departed loved ones to interact with us and to commune with us. And I think the Ouija board can be an effective tool for that, as long as it's used with respect and with knowledge about what you're doing. Personally, I don't use the Ouija board because I just find at this point that direct channeling is more effective for me. So if I were communing with someone who had crossed over, I would do that through my personal guide, my spirit guide that I work with, and he would be the one who would act as a go-between between us. And I wouldn't use a device like the Ouija board at this point, but I would just have that conversation with the dead in my own mind and in my own spirit through meditation and path working. How old were you when you found Wicca, and when did you tell people? It was in 1991, so I was about 19 or 20 when I first discovered Wicca and first began practicing, and I never really made it a secret in my life. I had already come out as gay, and people already knew who I was, and so it didn't really shock anyone in my life. Of course, along the way, a lot of members of my family were Christian and didn't like it. But at that point, it really didn't matter to me. So I was very open about what I was doing, and I was lucky that I never had any kind of negative ramifications from that, because I know that there is still a great deal of discrimination that goes on against people who practice alternative religions and religions like Wicca. So I just, from the very beginning, was very open with people around me, and friends, of course, were very supportive, and that was how it worked out for me.